Hello and welcome to the studio. Today we are going to look at a paint called Moonglow, which is made by Daniel Smith. And Moonglow is a mix of 3 different colors, a green, a blue and a red. I have my little palette of Moonglow here. I keep my Moonglow in a little single compact wooden palette. And I am going to paint something while I talk to you a little bit more about Moonglow. It is a ready-made grey, which is not something that I use in my botanical work. When I do botanical arts, I mix my own greys all the time. However, when I do my tone studies in the sketchbook, I am more open to the idea of using a ready-made grey. Most ready-made greys are made with a black pigment that is mixed with something else. For example, Payne's grey is black and blue, Davies grey is black and green sometimes, or black and yellow some other times. Even neutral tint is black and purple. And I don't like using black in my painting. I think although most black pigments are transparent, they're also rather dusty. So I prefer to avoid them altogether. What is different about Moonglow is that although it's a grey, there is no black in it. It is made by using 2 primaries and a secondary colour, which when mixed together neutralize each other, and that results in a grey. And that's what attracted me to Moonglow in the first place, is that it's a different way of making a grey. And it's quite similar to the way I mix my own grey as well. When I mix my own grey, I never use a black. I always mix 3 different primary colours or a secondary and a primary together. So this is the same approach. Let's have a look at the individual colours that are in Moonglow. The first one is Viridian. Viridian is a transparent colour. It's light fast, it's non-staining, and it is granulating. The second colour in Moonglow is French Ultramarine. French Ultramarine is also transparent. It is also very light fast. It is medium staining, and it is also granulating. A granulating pigment is a pigment that is quite heavy, and after you do your wash, it separates on the paper. So the more textured the paper, the more the pigment is going to granulate. The third color is Anthraquinoid Red. Anthraquinoid Red is also transparent. It is light fast, although it hasn't been tested independently by the ASTM, the American Society for Testing of Materials. It has only been tested in-house by Daniel Smith. It is medium staining and non-granulating, unlike the other 2. Now let's pause for a moment to look at the light fastness rating issue. Daniel Smith rates Anthraquinoid Red at 1, which means it is the most light fastness result that a paint can get. Other sources rate it at 3, which reads as moderately light fast. Light fastness is rated from 1 as the best to 5 as at the worst. So for example, a 5 would be something like Opera Rose, which is the most dreadful pigment. And a 1 would be something like French Ultramarine or Viridian, which are the other 2 pigments in Moonglow. As a rule, in my paint box, I don't have anything below 2. So depending on what sources I look at, Anthraquinoid Red could be acceptable in my palette if I go with Daniel Smith's own in-house rating at number 1. From other sources, it's number 2, that would be okay as well. When it goes to number 3, that's a bit more of a problem for me. And this is why currently, although I do love Moonglow and I use it a lot, it is confined to my sketchbook studies. As the pieces in there are not finished work, they will stay in the sketchbook, they will not be exposed to light, and I'm not going to sell them. For the finished pieces of work that I am going to sell in exhibitions, I do not use Moonglow, I mix my own grey. To be fair, it's not entirely because of Moonglow, it is because I would anyway. I have my own method of mixing grey that I call harmonic shadows, and I really concede that that could be replaced by a single paint for all my work. Now looking at this, we have the Anthracenoid Red, the Viridian and the French Ultramarine that together make the equivalent of Moonglow. I've mixed sort of a homemade Moonglow here on my palette. So in theory, if some of those less favourable ratings are correct, if Anthracenoid Red is going to fade, what you will end up with eventually is this colour, which is the same mix but taking the red out of the equation. It is a gorgeous colour, a mix of French Ultramarine and Viridian, but it is no longer a grey because the red is not in there. One of the most reliable sources for the rating of pigments like Fastness, apart from the ASTM, the American Society for Testing of Materials, is a site called handprint.com. And on that site, Anthracenoid Red is rated as not so reliable, but in his test, he found that the Daniel Smith version is better than the other brands. And the reason he gives for that is that Daniel Smith chemically treat the Anthracenoid Red. I'm going to get in touch with Daniel Smith and ask them a bit more about Anthracenoid Red, and I will write something in the comments if I get anywhere with that. But if you are serious about the light fastness of your paints, and you should be, then until the light fastness of Anthracenoid Red is clarified a bit better, then like me, you should probably keep Moonglow to your sketchbooks. Personally, I think that Anthracenoid Red could easily be substituted in that. Daniel Smith have got another colour called Carmine, and I think that would work just as well to make Moonglow, and that would make sure that the colour is definitely 100% reliable. You could get a grey similar to Moonglow, still granulating with Viridian and French Ultramarine with a smooth carmine in the background, but with a bit less controversy about the red that's in it. Now back to the paint's characteristics. Viridian is a blue bias green, French Ultramarine is a violet bias blue, and Anthracenoid Red is a violet bias red. And those three together, they make Moonglow. Moonglow is rated 1 in light fastness, although obviously this one is definitely not rated independently because it's a colour that only Daniel Smith makes, so they can only rate it in-house. It is low staining, granulating and transparent. The reason it's granulating is because out of the 3 pigments, 2 of them are granulating, so when you mix 2 granulating pigments, they granulate even more than it would if they were painted individually, which makes Moonglow a heavily granulating paint. Because all 3 are transparent, it's transparent as well. Staining wise, we've got non-staining, medium staining, so Moonglow is low staining. When I do my analysis of the painting that I have done while talking to you, we will go back to that. But you can see straight away looking at this that this is a very rich grey. It has a lot of depth. And the reason is there is no black in it. It's all very pure colours. So as a grey, it has a lot more richness to it, a lot more depth than a lot of ready-made greys. As you made it this far in the video, I have a confession to make. The first thing that really attracted me to Moonglow was the name. I know it's a terrible reason to buy a paint and it goes against everything I believe in. I am very serious about my pigments. But when I saw a paint called Moonglow Clair de Lune in French, I thought it was a very pretty name. Then I checked out the pigment and I saw that according to Daniel Smith's rating, the 3 paints in there were rated 1 in light fastness, and that they seemed to be pretty decent pigments, and that there was no black pigments in there, or pigments that I feel really strongly against, such as cadmiums, for example. And that the formula was actually quite interesting in the idea of mixing 3 saturated pure colours to make a grey, then I decided to give it a go. But the initial impulse was, ooh, I really like the name of this. So if anybody from Daniel Smith is watching this, if you ever make a blue called, I don't know, Mermaid's Breath, I will probably fall for this one as well. The moon so far has been painted all wet and wet. So now I'm going to do a little bit of dry brush to see how the paint handles in dry brush if I don't wet the paper first. So I'm just going to brush a little bit more colour in some areas to darken some of it, and also things like this little crater here, I could strengthen the outline, then blend it in, strengthen the impact. I could go a bit darker on this side as well. Okay, now I'm ready to make an assessment of the different parts. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to lift more lines out of the crater, impact lines. Moonglow is supposed to be moderately staining, which means that it should lift very easily. And you can see here that when I lifted wet in wet, I did manage to lift some lines. Lifting after the paint has dried though, it's not budging much. It's not lifting very well, so I would say it's actually quite staining. If you need to lift, you really need to lift while it's wet like I did before. If you wait for it to dry, you're not going to make much of an impact. It's lifting a bit, but I'm not going to get anywhere near back to the white paper. Now the wet in wet work, you can see because the paints are very granulated, it's very textured, which actually for painting the moon is very good. Another effect of granulating paints is that when a mix is made of several granulating paints, they separate as they dry in the water. If you paint wet in wet, they don't separate so much if you paint dry, but if you paint wet in wet, they will separate. And you can definitely see it on here. Where I've applied the paint very thinly, I have a sort of lilac-y, silvery grey. But even that is not a flat wash. There's loads of variations in it. Where I've applied the paint more heavily, you can actually see the three different colors. Here you can see some ultramarine all over the dark places. You can definitely see the anthracenoid red. It's very pink. It's a violet bias red, so it goes towards a pink when it's diluted. And you can see a lot of that in here. And here, where I went really heavily, you can even see some of the green. Some of the viridian is granulating in here and coming out. So the heavy granulation means that painted wet in wet, the paint will separate into its three components, and you will be able to see the three colors separately as well as the overall grey that they make together. I absolutely love that effect. I think it gives a lot of depth to a painting, and I think it makes it very lively. But depending on what subject you are painting, this is something that might work or might not work. For example, in my botanical work, if I use a granulating paint like this to paint a petal on a flower that should be very smooth, this is not going to work. But if I want to paint a heavily textured bark or some fruit or the moon, then the granulation and the separation works very well. So you just have to keep in mind, it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. If that's what you need, then it's great. If that's not what you need, that's not going to work. So you just have to bear in mind that it does that, and then use it when you need it. When I did a bit of dry brush on that, it worked very well. It hasn't left any paintbrush marks anywhere, so it handles well in dry brush as well as in wet in wet. And I just love the way that the red is just made a very smooth background, because the red is the only color of the three that is not granulating. So you've got that sort of very smooth glow of anthracenoid red all over the place, and then on top of that you've got the granulating Viridian and French Ultramarine. So you have the two textures together, and as it separates they give a different effect, and that sort of pinky red glow that it's given everywhere is really beautiful. But bear in mind that if you paint wet in wet like I did here, you will not be able to control this. And that's the beauty of it. One more test I need to try on this is if I can erase my pencil line when I've gone over with the paint. Some paints you can erase through them, some paints not so much. So this is something that I need to have a look at. Going with my rubber. This is a rubber, not a plastic one. I try to avoid plastic in my art practice as much as I can. It erases quite a lot of the lines, but not all of it. So I would say as far as erasing is going, it's a medium. And there we go, we have a moon painted in Moonglow. So in conclusion, we have a grey made without a black, which is definitely a positive thing. It's made of a green, a blue and a red, which gives it a lot of depth and a lot of richness. Because two of the pigments are granulating, it overall granulates quite a lot and separates as it dries if you paint wet in wet. It handled really well with the wet in wet technique. I mean, I really soaked this area before I dropped the pigment, and it handled beautifully. And it worked just as well with the dry brush technique as well. It doesn't lift very well, and the pencil lines can't completely be erased through it. I use Moonglow all the time to do my tone studies. I do not use it for botanical work in the finished pieces, just in the sketchbook. I am going to show you some examples of Moonglow used in my work. But before we get to that, if you like my tutorials and if you like my videos, you should check out my Patreon site. It's a subscription site where I do lots of ad-free videos, loads of tutorials, some free live streams, and a lot of paint-along videos, which are like tutorials but with a lot more details, following a whole project in several episodes. So go and check it out, and I might see you there soon. Now let me show you some examples in which I have used Moonglow in my work. So this is a study of a sweet pea, and I have done the tone study here in Moonglow, so more diluted in paler parts and less diluted in stronger parts. This is another one. This is a tulip, and again I've used Moonglow for the tone study, and when it comes to do the real painting, then I mixed my own shadow color, and the real painting, which isn't finished yet, you can just see the shadow color underneath the purple there. And this is another one which I thought I would show you because that's quite useful. I have used a different medium for each tone study on each area. So here I have used a washable pencil. On this one I've just used a normal pencil. I've just used, I think it was a 4B for that one, in 2mm, and I have just left it just as a rough hatching with the pencil. On this one I have used the Moonglow, so I have used the paint, and this is a study that I've got in my new book, in which I show 3 different ways of doing a tone study on a very similar subject. So now I hope that you know a little bit more about Moonglow, how it works, what's in it and what you can achieve with it. I use it for my tone studies all the time in my sketchbook. It is a gorgeous color. I love the way that it behaves wet in wet. Just keep in mind that the red has inconsistent results in light fastness testing. I'm actually going to start my own test because I read so many contradicting reports on it that I will start my own test, and then in a few months' time I will add in the comments what my own results are. In the meanwhile, Moonglow will stay in my sketchbooks, and it will keep its very secured place in my palette as a beautiful color for tone studies. For disclosure purposes, I have to say that I did buy Moonglow myself. I've been using it for years. It wasn't sent to me as a freebie by Daniel Smith. But the links below are affiliated links, so I will get a little bit of money if you order through my link in Jackson's Art Supply. Also, if you like my little paint box that I have here, I will also put a link to that in the box. This is actually from my own little Etsy shop. I have these made especially, and I sell them online in my little Etsy shop. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have Moonglow and you would like to share your experience with us, or if you have some tips on how you use it or what you use it for, please use the comments below. It's always nice to hear from you. And in the meanwhile, I'll see you in the next video. Happy painting! Bye!